All right. We all set there, Kate?
You are all set.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Lyons, the chairman of the Charter and Code Review Committee. It is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024 at 4 o'clock. And I'm going to convene the meeting in accordance with the rules of the state of Delaware and the town of Dewey Beach. We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Let's go around. We'll just do a roll call real quickly. Dan O'Malley.
Present.
Lane Boyle.
Present.
Jimmy O'Connor.
Present.
Okay, and myself, Dave Lyons. We also have Commissioner Persinger, our town manager, Bill Zolper, and also from our code enforcement group, Don Hinks.
Yes.
Anybody else I missed there? Okay. Let's move on to our first action is to adopt the agenda for today's meeting. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
What is 10?
Do I have a motion? Marcia's also joined us now. So.
Yeah.
Make a
I have a motion.
All right, thank you, Lane. Second, please.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. The next item is to approve the minutes from January 17th. I want to thank Elaine who took the time to proofread my work and make sure I got it all correctly. I sent the revised minutes out to everyone. Are there any comments or suggestions on those minutes? No? Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt those minutes?
Motion to adopt them, Elaine Bowl.
Thank you, Elaine. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Just going to preface this. Today we have 4 things on the agenda. We do have a firm stop at 5:30 as the Board of Adjustments is meeting at 6. So we'll work our list as far as we can and hopefully today get it all covered. So at this point, I want to open the public meeting to see if anyone has a comment from either Zoom or that's in the room there. Any public comment?
Doesn't look like it, Dave.
Okay, great. Anything from our committee members? Anything anybody wants to discuss before we get started today?
No comment.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. All right. So with that, let's move on to our first agenda item. Bear with me just a second. Okay. The first agenda item is discuss and possibly vote to recommend to the town commissioner amendments to chapter 71 of the town code regarding building permit requirements when repairs are needed to residential or commercial properties. So I'm sure everyone recalls we did start this conversation during the last meeting. We wanted to get some more data so that we could have a more meaningful dialogue on the topic. I do want to state one thing before we get too far is we have not yet had a chance to speak with FEMA. I remember because so much of the town is in a flood zone and we're required to comply with the requirements set forth by FEMA and our own town code. We need to be careful about what adjustments we make to our code so that we don't invalidate our partnership in the National Flood Insurance Program. So we're going to go ahead and start there because we've got some good data to be able to talk about, and I think kind of help frame out our decisions. So the first I wanted to suggest to the group, and I'll put it out there, is maybe some common definitions that we should consider maybe incorporating into the town code. And I have just three I'm going to read to the group, and then we can go through and discuss them. So the three I wanted to suggest we define are repair, and I'm going to suggest as a definition, the reconstruction, replacement, or renewal of any part of an existing building for the purpose of its maintenance or to correct damage. The next one I'm going to suggest is maintenance, is the upkeep, repair, and other work performed on a building to keep it safe, presentable, and functional. And the last I would suggest would be construction, which would to build, erect, assemble, or place a building or structure. So wanted to see what the group's reaction was to those descriptions, to see if that made sense to everyone. Anything anybody want to add? Dawn, I'd especially like for you to speak up here too, if you think these are appropriate or not.
Good afternoon. Yes, I feel definitions and areas to distinguish what is meant needs to be put in our code, because each of those items, depending upon the individual and their side of whatever they're doing, the project or not, and so forth, has varying opinions. So yes, I feel definitions would be in order.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the other committee members?
Hey, Dave, it's Dan. In repair and maintenance, in each of those definitions you read out, I think they include the other term. So repair includes maintenance and maintenance includes repair. I'm not sure if that was intentional or if we want. Otherwise, I'm good.
Nope, I think you are correct. We should, when we last talked, I think probably what we're going to do is in maintenance, strike the word repair. And in repair, we should probably strike the maintenance.
Yep, that sounds good.
That's a good point. Thank you, Dan. Okay. Okay. So I think what I'd like to do first is let's see if I get a motion to adopt those three definitions, make a recommendation to the commissioners that we include those. So if I could get just a motion to go ahead and accept those definitions. Thank you, Dan.
I'll second it.
And Jimmy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right. Let's move on to the next area. And the topic was really, should the threshold of $1,000 in material costs for normal maintenance be increased? And as everybody recalls, the last time we reviewed this, am I okay there? We did agree to.
I need to, can I say something? I'm sorry, I don't know if it's are you getting an unusual sound?
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is. All right, well, I'll hold for it. My question, first of all, is this: you didn't have a vote scheduled on your agenda for adopting those definitions. Not sure that that's appropriate. We may need a ruling on that from our parliamentarian or FOIA person. So I'm not sure. I'm just going to raise the question, then I'll be silent. I'll get rid of the feedback.
Yep. Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's. I guess we'll consult with Fred on whether or not that's appropriate. If not, we can bring it up in the next meeting and review it at that point. Let's move on then to the data. So Kate was kind enough to post some data that Bill Zolper and Laura were kind enough to pull for us. One of the things we wanted to get to. And Kate, can you bring up that data for everybody to see?
If I could, Dave, just say that Laura Steiner, who works in our front office, who operates the admin side up front, did this in her own time on the front, and she did a very good job. And I know you and I have gone back and forth, and she made the adjustments per your request. But when you're ready, she is prepared to also walk us through this.
Oh, great. If Laura's there, we could have her walk through. That'd be great.
Hi, I'm Laura. I put this together, per the request. What we are looking at on these is permit counts initially. This is broken down by calendar year because that is how building permits are issued in the town. Their numbering resets at the beginning of each calendar year, and that's how they look at them as they're doing their paperwork. So what we've broken down here is the number of permits in different categories. So the top line shows permits that were under $5,000. We had 156 of them in 2023, and we had 88 in 2022. The next line is permits between $5,000 and $7,000, 31 in 2023 and 33 in 2022. Permits between $7,000 and $10,000, so 48 in 2023 and 40 in 2022. And then we put the total number of permits that were under $10,000. So if you were to add up each of those categories above, you'll see that there were 235 total permits submitted that were labor and materials requested were less than $10,000. In 2023, there was 235. In 2022, there was 155. And then the final line there shows the total number of permits that were processed by the building department for the entire year. So of the 523 permits that were processed in 2023, 235 of them were under $10,000 in material costs and labor as requested on the applications that were submitted to Town Hall. Included in that, like one of the reasons you'll see that the permits under $5,000 are a little higher, one of the reasons is there were 30 permits issued with a $0 amount. These were permits that were requests for things that are allowed, such as tree pruning. We do ask for the permit, so the town is monitoring and aware of what trees are being worked on around town, but we do not charge for that work to be done. There were also several permits for work done on behalf of the town, repairs, maintenance, road work, sewer work, that nature. But we do issue permits for that work to be done as well. If we move on to the next chart, you see the total cost of the work. So this is, instead of the number count of how many permits, it's the dollar amount of the cost of work that was requested in each category. Just to give you an idea. Now on this one, we didn't do the full year total. We just ended it with in total amount of work requested under $10,000, $10,000 and under, and it's broken down into those three categories there. So we had it there, and we also had it on a table, so you can compare side by side those numbers in the categories of under $5,000, $5,001 to $7,000, and then $7,000 to $10,000, just so you could have an idea of how much work was being requested by people who were submitting those permits.
I have a question on that. Can you
Sure.
push that slide back down? So the total number under 10,000, the 981, 400,000 represents what again? Was that?
The materials and labor requested on the application. So that line on the application that says total cost of materials and labor.
Yes.
So if we add up all of the permits that were submitted, that were $10,000 and less on their original request, if you total up all those permits, it's that much money was said would be the labor and materials cost.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then on our final chart shows the permit fees that the town collected for each of those categories over 2022 and 2023. So you can see that in 2023, the town collected $16,293 on permits that were submitted that said they were less than $5,000 in materials and labor. Now, included in that number, there is a couple of demo permits are included, because on demolition, they do not ask, there is not necessarily a dollar value needed for the demolition, because it is a flat fee to have that work done. So we don't say you have to tell us exactly how much it's costing for that work to be done. Very often it's part of a sub part of the greater project going on for the rebuild. So
Do you know, how many permits in under 10,000 there were for demo? Because I know we've had a lot of demos, so I'm kind of curious, because that fee, I believe, is 1,500. So
Mhm.
that is hugely skewed when we're looking at permits that cost 50 to 200.
let's see. I believe, and I had this on another chart, I believe it wasn't as much as we think. I think it was only 6 in 2022
Okay.
and like maybe 8, but 6 to 8 each year on demo.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. And then, so the total amount of permit fees collected for a total of the work requested under $10,000 was $35,991 in 2023, and then $24,098 in 2022. But it is broken down by each category there as well for 2022 and 23. So then on the final page of the information that was submitted, what we've included is if we did a flat fee, can you scroll down, sorry. There should be one more page. There you go. Yeah. So it shows these are the fees that were collected. If we had a flat fee instead of just $50, the fourth column there shows what that potential loss in income to the town would be if those categories had a flat fee of $50 versus the full fee that is charged now for all those dollar amounts. So we have one for 2022 calendar year and one for 2023 calendar year. So in 2022, if a flat fee of $50 were implemented for all permits $5,000 and less, the town would have collected 6,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading that wrong. The town would have lost $3,441 versus the $7,841 that was collected. If it were for everything under $7,000, the town would have collected $6,050 and had a loss of about $77.84. And then the same for 2023 calendar year, we show those breakdowns of what the town would have lost had it been a flat fee of $50. So in 2023, if there was a flat fee of $50 implemented for all permits under $7,000, the town would have collected $7,850. If all fees were eliminated, it would have been under $7,000. It would have been $22,469 potential loss.
Okay. Looks good. Thank you for putting that together.
Sure.
Awesome.
Does anyone have any questions about the information that's in there?
I think it's really good. I think just one thing I might have would have liked to have seen was the demo permits removed, because if I look at the under $10,000 category and I take the 8, let's say 8 listed in 2023, that accounts for $12,000, almost a third of the $35,000 issued. Because that permit fee is $1,500. It's a flat fee, not based on anything. So it's always collected at the same rate and never will be excluded. So I think it does skew it up when
Yep.
totals would be skewed down if we're talking about the 35,000 total in 2023 minus 12,000 that were demos. Really, we have under 10,000, 23,000 was collected in total fees, 10,000 and under. And so, and I'm not sure which category that 1,500 was put in, the 5,000, the 10,
Right.
because those, because those are all based on the amount of work, and the demo fee isn't. So when I look at that, if I just take that 12,000 out and I look at the 35,000 minus 12 is 23,000, it's only about 3.5% of the 650,000 we collected in there. So it is still a pretty relatively low percent when you look, when we're trying to streamline getting these lower level permits processed quicker, and what is the threshold for not needing a permit. I think it's important to weigh out that you're talking about 23,000 out of 650,000, and where do we balance that in something reasonable that, yes, the town will have some losses, maybe it's 3,000 to 5,000, but I think it's important to understand that in streamlining those and taking out that there's a lot of administrative work in that. You're making up for that in the hours somebody is spending on something else at a higher level of a permitting cost and moving it through faster. So I just want everybody to just keep that in mind.
Yep. Marsha, I'd agree. I just did some quick math with Laura, and I'm talking in 2023, there were 187 permits less than $7,000. And if we didn't permit anything for $7,000 and less, we would have given up about $22,000. So it represents, 35% of the permit workload, and we're only giving up $22,000. So in terms of a compromise, in terms of streamlining the administrative without impacting the town budget, that's something that we could certainly, I think, consider as a group. So.
I think that's 33%, 33 to 35% of the workload is a huge workload when you're looking at the big picture and the small amount of money.
Right.
So
Right.
It's good, really good data. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. It was great. Any other comments? Good.
I looked at this, and what I thought was kind of striking was, now that you have enforcement in the town for permits and you're going around, that I don't know how much of it was a jump from 2022 to 2023 in some of the numbers. Bill, was the enforcement also having more people come in and actually get a permit, because before they weren't getting a permit?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're on target with that. I mean, with John being out there, checking every day, making sure permits are posted, making sure business licenses are obtained, and making sure folks have the permits. That's made a real difference on the number that we've had come in this past year.
So I guess my point is the income could continually go up, because I don't think we ever said $7,000 anyway. I think it was anything under 3,000. Wasn't that the number that we came up with?
The number we all discussed was 2,500. That was
$2,500?
$2,500 in materials at that point, right? So this is taking a look at the entire cost, both labor and materials, is what we're, because that's really what they track today.
Mhm.
They track the total amount on the permit as opposed to just materials. It's hard to get just the materials cost versus the labor. So we just looked at it as both. And we as a group may want to consider, instead of just looking at materials, be able to take a look at the whole amount of the request and find what is that sweet spot. Is it 7,000? Is it 10,000? The example I used was 7,000, which was 35% of the permits and $22,000 a reduction in revenue to the town. That assumes that there was no charge for any permits under $7,000. Laura presented another scenario there where a permit, you'd still have to come in and get permitted, but it would only be for $50. So that's less impact in terms of revenue in that model.
So Bill, my question is to the town. I see a couple of unintended consequences of the hard work that's been done to try to actually get people to get permits. And so this stuff has been put in place and now it's starting to work. And I think it would, as long as the economy stays healthy and people continue to do the work that they're doing, that number will increase. Is it a burden? One, I have two-part question. Is it a burden or is it something that could be considered a safeguard for the town, that you actually have people who know permits are a serious business, whether it's for 5,000 or and business license are serious business. We want people that are working in this town to know that they need to be checking in with town hall. Do you see it eroding at all if we take away change the permit situation so that people say, okay, because we know they're cheating now. 88 is not a lot, right? All right. So what do you see of any kind of unintended consequences by changing or recommending? Because all we'll do is recommend.
No, I think it's a good point. I think Dawn can expand on the FEMA requirements. We're in a gray area. FEMA sometimes requires that we document work that's being done, especially in our flood zone, which is basically from Clayton down to Collins Street, because we want to be part of the program, as the chair had said earlier. But FEMA doesn't require us to charge for that. So if we didn't charge, we'd still be doing the work. We have to see the documentation come across. Dawn and Jim would still look at it, or a clerk that we just been approved in our budget would look at. So the paperwork would still have to be done. We'd still have to file it. Maybe, we wouldn't charge for it. And then that would kind of hurt us because we're doing all the work, looking at the paper, but not charging the fees. I think with John being out there on the weekend also, I've gotten calls on Sundays because John doesn't work on Sundays, and so I get calls from people in the different neighborhoods, especially up in the north end, about work being done on Sundays. And the way we treat that is either I'll go out or the police will go out and just say, hey, you can't work on a Sunday. But if it's an emergency matter, if it's an air conditioner unit, if it's a pipe that's burst, if it's a hot water heater, if it's a heater in a house, something that has to be done, that needs to be done, a hole in the roof. There's no problem with those folks doing that work during those off hours and on those days that aren't allowed, because those are emergency situations. All we ask is that those folks come and get a permit Monday when we're back to business. But since John's been out there driving around doing this enforcement, we have definitely seen an increase of folks coming into the office, getting business license and getting permits.
My point is, from the committee standpoint, is I don't see that for the whole picture, that changing the situation and changing how much, unless it's the $1,000 or I just don't really see a great benefit, maybe for individuals, maybe for me, but not for the town as a whole. Unless the town says that it was a burden, it's too much paperwork and it's not serving a purpose. I think that so that's my position, actually.
Okay. Mr. Spence, I see you're online. Did you want to speak or add anything to it? I know you came in and spoke to us before. We're trying to get some more data to be able to make some kind of recommendation here. So I want to give you the opportunity to add anything.
If you don't mind, I mean, I realize I'm not a member of the committee, but
You're part of the public.
okay. Well, I did appear once, and I submitted what I would describe as a working draft of a proposed amendment. And I think I described then that I was trying to distinguish between, and I'm generally in favor of there being definitions of the terms that you were talking about, by the way. I hadn't given that enough thought when we were doing our initial drafting, but our concept was that if we're not actually building a building or expanding a building or making a significant change in a building, then other than I mean, I'm okay with the concept of somebody being out there making sure that people that are coming to the town as professionals to perform work get licenses to do what they do. They should have them. We're not opposed to that and think that's a good idea. But when you're talking about replacing a water heater, replacing parts in an air conditioner, fixing the plumbing problem, doing things that are always going on, particularly for the commercial businesses, and to a large degree the homes as they get older, that they're not something that requires any real design. They're not typically FEMA related, although one could argue that, you know, outside compressors should be raised, things like that. But I think those are what I call building code standards. But our problem was occurring was the frequency with which somebody was being encouraged to get a permit for what we thought was maintenance and repair, which posed a time delay and administrative burden for everybody, both the town and for the person involved, the contractor involved. And so we were hoping that we could have exemptions for things that were not structure, and that were typically fall into the category of maintenance and repair. And so when I drafted, that's what I was hoping for. You know, the material and labor concept, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really given that a thought in terms of where there's an exemption line based on cost. But I think that is a good idea. And the other things that I tried to add into the exemption were my examples of things that just didn't seem to be a change in a building or an addition to a building. They were just, you know, fixing the plumbing, electrical, kitchen appliances, the list of things that I put. And we still very much think that that would be a good idea. How the definitions are used to clarify that is work well done. It was only a suspicion because I didn't have any of the data, but it looks like the data supports my view that the loss in revenue at the very lower end is not going to be that significant. And it probably is a lot less work for the building official and those who support her at the lower levels. And so we're still a big fan of all this moving forward in some direction. We thank the committee for spending the time on it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody else? Dawn, I'm gonna go ahead. Let's chime in, Dawn. I assume you're gonna talk a little bit about FEMA.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And so when I appear with on picture or camera, that's when I would like to just wave and be able to say, this is what I'd like to add to you folks. In respect to this, as the building official, I certainly am in the capacity to enforce what you folks or the town commissioners put into place. And so with this is the consideration that I feel that the Charter and Code Committee, as well as the commissioners, planning and zoning, needs to realize. This is found in our code, in code section 101-12. And this is within our Flood Reduction Act. It was adopted in 2015, 2016, that time frame. So it does talk about the code itself section is permits required. And then it does go out down and list all the different areas that permits are required when it comes to any property within what's called a special flood hazard area. That's about 70 to 80% of our town. And as somebody said, Clayton Street down further south. So anyway, this particular code talks about construction or any other development, including but not limited to, and it says, and I'm reading it, subdivision of land, filling, grading, or other site improvements, and utility installations, construction, alteration, remodeling, improvement, replacement, reconstruction, repair, relocation, or expansion of any building or structure. We don't have a problems with manufactured homes. We don't allow that any longer. But then it talks about recreational vehicles and so forth. So anyway, all of those things, it says it shall be it will be illegal, excuse me, wrong. It shall be unlawful with those particular items identified until a permit is obtained from the town of Dewey Beach. So that's within our code, 101-12A. So with that, that is something that I feel each of the committees needs to realize that it is in our code, and something that the town needs to discuss with FEMA in relationship to what they would like to do with building permits, costs, things of that nature.
So I'm just going to add to that. We did, just one thing, Lana, we did set up a meeting with FEMA. I think it's March 4th at noon, that we're going to try and get some clarity on what they call significant improvement versus significant, I think it's, what's
Substantial
the
improvement.
Yeah, substantial improvement. So we're going to just ask for some clarity from them with the intent, hopefully, of being able to simplify, our code, or simplify what does require a permit. So we just feel we need to cross that T and dot that I before we make any substantial change or recommendation for a change, because the flood insurance is very important to everybody in the town, and we don't want to do anything that would put us at risk of losing that coverage from the National Flood Insurance Program. So we are working it. I'd hope we have the data for today, but we should have it in a couple of weeks. We can certainly share the outcome of that meeting in advance, so we can probably get to a recommendation once we have that extra data. Elaine, did you want to say something?
I think that when Mr. Spence was speaking, and he points out an irritation that I think being in a building of 46 units of where there's 127 HVACs that are over $6,000. So they're not even in the category of the numbers that we're talking about, but replacing those, because in this weather, and there's so many mechanical things in buildings that need to be replaced. So it is when you're doing your budget every year, and you have to look at not operational, but capital reserves for the things that you have to change. And then you have to add in the amount when it's big things, like whether it's painting or whatever. But that's a huge amount of income for, I think, not huge, but it's certainly not reflected in these numbers that she provided us, because as far as replacing the mechanicals that people have to replace, especially for the businesses. I mean, when the businesses are, and I think how we dealt with it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it is a month between each one of these meetings, but we just looked at when it was a $2,500 is I think the number you said, correct?
Right.
And that $2,500, that's usually not something, that's pretty much I think, like, sometimes people show up at your house and they charge you $2,500 these days. So the numbers that were provided to us were based on the $2,500, not based upon us deciding, changing the definitions, as well as like what is constituted having to pay the town for a new geothermal room. We're replacing it. It's maintenance because we have to replace it, but we paid a large amount of money to have to replace that to the town. So I think that is what Mr. Spence is talking about. And I think that's a whole separate topic and isn't reflected in any of the numbers that we see from Laura.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of confused on that one. So the $2,500 that we discussed before, the current threshold is if the material cost of the work is less than $1,000, no permits required. We as a group suggested $2,500 material cost
Right.
as a potential threshold. No, we didn't have a lot of data around that, but just kind of a gut feel. What we've come back to now with the input Laura's done is she's taken a look at the labor and materials cost, because that's what the permit is actually issued for. And that's where we're suggesting that I'll use the $7,000 mark. If we were to not require permits for $7,000 and less, material and labor, that the town would lose potentially $22,000.
I'm talking about Mr. Spence, and it's not probably going on a sidebar here, but what he's talking about is definitions of what, and this is the whole FEMA issue, about paying for maintenance, because from from my perspective, when having to go through the budget, it seems we have to pay the town because we're replacing our air conditioner. It's broken. We already paid for it once. And, but I do think that that's not going to change. I think it brings in too much money, because there's a lot of that's going on in town. And I would think that's a lot of times what your building inspector guy was finding, right, Bill? People that were putting things in that were $6,000, $10,000 pieces of equipment that hadn't gotten a permit.
I mean, he finds a spectrum of different things that people are doing, pruning trees to putting in big pieces of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing devices.
I shouldn't speak for Spence, but I think that, to Mr. Spence, but I think that that's what you were talking about, the definition of paying a permit price for replacing something that had gone bad.
Right. And I think that's what we're trying to get. Dawn, I'm gonna bring in just a minute. We're trying to get some clarity on that. And I think, Dawn, if you're not gonna bring up, it might be good to just kind of reiterate FEMA, what's in FEMA's documents, because I think some of the way we're managing today is because FEMA doesn't necessarily recognize a maintenance or repair in some of their documents.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
I do.
But go ahead, Dawn. Do you have more to add?
Just to give an example of what has taken place today with John. He was out perusing the town. There was a home on the north end who did get a permit for re-roofing. So they were quite valid and so forth. Did have the permit posted, and come to find out when he went by, he noticed that they were doing interior renovations. Nothing was listed on that permit for interior renovations. So many times a permit may be for one thing, but whenever it is investigated, there's been so many other things added to it that perhaps the homeowner said, could you add to, could you do this, could you do that, without the understanding that the permit that they did get only covers, in this case, the roof, not the interior renovations that they were doing. So unfortunately, there had to be a stop work order on what they were doing internally.
Does it make sense, Dave, since you're gonna have the meeting with FEMA and you can get some designation of what actual requirements, and I suppose you can have this discussion with our end goals of what we're trying to achieve, like present to FEMA if we have a threshold of 5,000 or 10,000 and it's maintenance related, what would you consider that? I think if you have that meeting upcoming and we have that now down, it's easier to move forward with the recommendation. And I think given that it probably is a little premature to do anything. I think the other just thing I want to remind people is that, you know, a significant loss to the town or a huge loss to the town is a pretty subjective form. In my mind, 23,000 out of 650,000 is not a very noticeable loss to the town when you consider our budget and you consider the amount of administrative hours it takes to review these. So I think if we're looking at a 30% workload and $23,000, and we find after your meeting that FEMA does not need to consider certain general items, then I think certainly the workload outweighs the $23,000 and we can have a better, I think that's our last data point we need.
Right. And I think that's what we're trying to get. I think the goal we've all discussed is pretty clear. How can we restrict the administrative burden, make it easier for the homeowner, make it easier for the town without dramatically impacting our budget and still meet FEMA's requirements for the National Flood Insurance Program. If we can get there, then I think next time we should have enough that we should be able to make a recommendation.
Didn't Bill Zolper say they do the work anyway? They're doing all the paperwork anyway for all these?
Right, you did say that.
Yeah, so Dawn can expand on this. As of right now, the way we interpret the FEMA regulations are, if you do repairs or maintenance, as of right now, FEMA is requesting or wanting us to do paperwork. We don't have to charge anything for it. We have to do the paperwork. And that's so there's a paper trail when they come in and audit us to say, hey, you're still compliant with the program, you can remain in it. We have a paper trail on a lot of different things. We're hoping that meeting in March, we'll be able to nail that down and try to find out from FEMA if they'll actually tell us, do we really need to have a paper trail on every little thing? And if they say we do, then we're going to continue as business as we've been doing. If Dawn and the chair have that meeting with FEMA and we can change it, I'm sure that'll be brought up.
Right.
Bill, do you have any data on what's the time frame right now it takes to process, say, a permit for a minor repair, which is maintenance related, meaning replacement of something where there's not a lot of structural code issues to look at. You're replacing a sidewalk, the current sidewalk exists. Whether honestly that sidewalk is in the setbacks or not really wouldn't matter much because it'd be grandfathered if you were replacing it in the same section versus a minor addition or a roof versus major new construction.
So the way we've kind of set it up, and Dawn, you can jump in on this, is Dawn handles most of the very big projects, houses being rebuilt, tear downs, major renovations, and then Jim Dedes handles the things that you may be describing now. That all depends on what the workload is. As you see, we're up to, this year so far, we're up to about 600 permits coming through the door for the year. And Jim tries to get through those as quickly as possible, but I pull them away because we're doing the new town hall. I pull them away for the 5G poles. I pull him away for a number of different things that we're working on. So he's not there all the time to do that. In this new budget that was just passed, we do have a person we'll be hiring that Dawn will be training that will be able to take some of that away from Jim to try to process these quicker. And then Jim can actually work with me on the other projects that I get sidelined sometimes on. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great.
Mr. Chair, there is somebody in the audience that would like to make a comment. I don't know if you'll allow that now, but there is somebody here that would like to make a comment.
Yeah, sure. Whoever it is, if they would step up to the podium and just introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is John Snow, and I'm a partner in Highway 1, and we own some businesses in town. And I think just to give some context, the way this started, at least with Mr. Spence, was we're not looking to hurt the town in any type of revenue way. But we ran into situations where, for example, there's 2 toilets that are clogged at Jimmy's, and one of the roll-down electric doors is jammed, and the steamer went down on a Saturday. All that happened. And that's not unusual. I mean, it happens all the time. So we were kind of just talking, do we need to get permits for all of that? Because if we all had to do that, the amount of the permits that the town processed wouldn't be 600, it'd be 6,000. So we just wanted some clarification on what are we allowed to just fix? And then you throw on top of it, we're in the middle of the summer and we have 2 toilets down and a steamer and 1 door won't close, so we can't close the building. How long do we have to wait to find out if we're allowed to do any of that? So it really didn't have anything to do with, we don't want to pay more fees. It was more like, let's just try to find a way to make this legitimate. So I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. And Jimmy doesn't feel like he's doing anything wrong. But the town is still getting the fees and the information that they need. That's really where it all stemmed from. It was just on any given Saturday, at any of our 5 places, there's 10 things happening that are just to keep the ball rolling. So that's really where it started from us. And I just wanted to make sure everybody had that context.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else have public comment? Anybody else there in the room that wants to speak?
Dave,
Yes, Gary.
just a second, I'll start. I was gonna start video, but I don't seem to be able to do that. I'm now down to my iPhone. I'm having a lot of trouble here. I think, what we've talked about in the past was, can we make things easier, particularly for these lower cost projects, perhaps like some of the ones that were just described. And the question I think we want to ask FEMA, and I think there is some opportunity in what I've read of the FEMA regulations to be able to do some of these things without a formal permitting process. But if FEMA wants us to track things, to make sure that we're highlighting instances where a bunch of smaller repairs be a substantial renovation, which would trigger some of the other FEMA requirements. Maybe there's a way of providing some administrative permits so that for a particular project, you've got a cost, you have an estimate for the cost of that project, you provide that to the town, you immediately get an administrative permit. The town then has the paperwork for tracking things. Maybe you charge a $50 fee for that, or something else like that. It doesn't even have to necessarily be based on a percentage of the cost. But you need to make sure that you can do that within FEMA regulations. And I think that's, at least, if I'm able to sit in on the 4th of March when you have this meeting scheduled, that's the kind of information I'd like to have in order to move forward with this. And I'm sure the committee would as well. So that's just a little bit of my thinking on this.
Thank you, Gary. Anyone else? So I think at this point, we've just shared the information. We're not in a position to make any recommendation. Hopefully, as soon as we get some more information for perhaps next month's meeting, we'll be able to come up with some recommendations for the commissioners. All right. Any other comments on that one?
Let me ask real quick. So what John said was, if he's got 2 toilets to go down, does he need to get a permit to have somebody come in?
So my opinion on that, and Dawn jump in, is all he needs is, if you're hiring somebody to come in, they should have a business license to fix it.
Right.
That's it. If there's any other question about that, you're more than welcome to come see us on Monday, and we could tell you if you had to get a permit. But again, if it's an emergency, and the town hall is not open to issue permits, you need to get the work done. Please get your work done. Get back to business. Fix your hot water heater, whatever it is, your steamer, whatever, and then Monday come in, and if it needed a permit, then we'll talk to you about that. If it doesn't, it's just a business license for whoever's coming in to do the repair. And if it's somebody that, for example, Highway 1 has a maintenance guy that comes around and does that, if that's under part of the Highway 1 business license, then I don't believe that they would need one. But if you bring in a heat and air guy that's separate from that, and they come in and do your repair on a weekend, they should really have a town business license.
Okay. But like remodeling the bathroom is different than fixing a toilet.
It is. So for example, you go to remodel a bathroom, and Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, the county wants you to get an inspection also on that, correct?
The county, whenever there's a bathroom remodel, they have told me that they want a permit only for the bathroom remodel. If some They've come back and said if someone is doing a kitchen remodel, they don't want the town to send the applicant over to the county. So a lot of times it depends upon the county's desire whether they want a permit or not. They used to require us to send over applicants whenever there was a kitchen renovation of a residential single-family home. Midstream, since I've been here, they came back and said, nope, we've changed our mind. No kitchen renovations. Do we need to have a permit nor the applicant to come over? But they still want a bathroom. So many times when we send applicants over to the county, it's because the county has told us we want that permit. And of course, many times the county will not do any inspections of whatever they've permitted.
And I think probably the difference between the kitchen and the bathroom and the county wanting the permit probably has to do with the sewage for bathrooms and the safety of sewage. That's what I would guess if they've changed that.
But the repair toilets are something that John had talked about. It's just whoever's doing the work needs to have a business license.
All right. And you know, to the point, that's why I started the discussion with definitions for repair and maintenance, because I think that's going to help go a long way in terms of clarity, which is what we're all seeking to do. Speed the process and kind of make it very clear for everyone what they can and can't do without a permit or with a permit. Okay.
If
All
I
right.
might, I had one very minor last comment, which is thank you again. And ultimately, when we get to the point of the issue being resolved, the current application form for Dewey for a building permit is so broad that it tends to be all inclusive when I'm not sure that's what everybody intends. But I only point out that coming into next year, 2024, that the application form itself is let's just say intentionally very broad and creates in many cases more confusion than clarity. But thank you again.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. If there's no more on that topic, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Kate, could you bring up the next document that's related to the tree ordinance? And really what I want to do is I'm going to read this while Kate's getting herself situated. We want to go to the penalty section. So number 2 on the agenda was discuss and possibly vote on amendments to the tree ordinance, section 173-6, consider increased penalties and strengthening language related to tree replacement and implement a fine for any firm who removes a tree without a permit. So I guess the first one I'll kind of point out here is section A. A violation of any provision of the chapter shall be subject to a minimum assessment of $500 for each offense. The next item, is it okay to just work on the violations and penalties here? Does anybody feel like they need to see what is the criteria for which a tree can be removed? Anybody need to know that? We want to revisit that again?
I don't.
Okay. So basically what we state here in B is that if you fail to replace a tree, you're subject to a fine of $1,000, increasing to $3,000 if you don't pay it if not paid within 60 days. Failure to replace a tree is required within 1 year of the notice of violation, incurs an additional fine of $3,000, increasing by $3,000 for each additional year the tree is not replaced. So that's the first. And then the next C, any person who violates this chapter by improperly removing or destroying a tree shall be subject to a fine of $3,000 and shall be required to place such a tree with a tree of comparable size and comparable species selected from the Delaware Department of Agriculture list of recommended trees. Fines for improper removal or destruction that remain unpaid after 60 days shall incur a penalty of an additional $3,000. Failure to replace a tree as required within a 1-year period, as determined by the town building official, shall incur additional $3,000 penalty, increasing by $3,000 for each additional year. And the last thing I think is any unpaid fines for violations of this chapter shall be satisfied before any future licenses, I think, or permits, I think that's the wording there, are issued. So last time we talked about also adding something for any contractor that removes a tree without a permit, making them also liable for the fee. I think we also talked about, in the case of $1 million home, a fee of $3,000 doesn't have much teeth. So I'll leave it. I'll open up to the group to say, does anyone have any suggestions for how we might increase these, or what would be something that would be more meaningful?
Dave, could I interject something scary?
Sure, Gary.
We talked a little bit about this at the last town council meeting. As you'll recall, there was a section of the charter where we talked about the maximum fee, or maximum fine rather, that the alderman can levy. Right now that's set at $1,000. And I think there was a recommendation from the committee that we increase that to $3,000. These two things work together. As I understand it, there was a situation where someone improperly took down a tree. They were fined $3,000 and they appealed that back to the alderman and had that fine reduced. I don't believe it was eliminated. I think it was just reduced to $1,000 because that was the limit from the alderman, for the alderman. So I think we've got a connection here that we need to worry about. One of the solutions that our town solicitor suggests that we might want to think about is that whatever fee you levy additionally, that you then just levy that same fee sequentially. Maybe it's daily, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, whatever you determine is an appropriate time period, if that fee remains unpaid. So that's kind of background. We didn't have a clear solution when we talked about this at the meeting last Friday, but again, it's something that you should think about as you begin to think about recommending ways to increase the penalties and ways increase the pain that someone might feel or might have to bear if they do violate this provision illegally or without having a permit, first of all, or failing to replace a tree as they're supposed to do. And these would be trees that are taken down legally with a permit. There's still an obligation to replace the tree if you've done so under a permit.
Thank you, Gary. Was there any discussion amongst the commissioners about an increased level of fines? I mean, since you were talking about the alderman, I mean, if we go to $5,000, then we'd obviously have to recommend that we allow, or that the alderman can levy a fine of $5,000.
Yeah, there's certainly, I think, there's probably willingness to increase that fine that the alderman can levy. I just don't know at this point if there's anything in state law that would prohibit us from doing something like that. I don't know if there's a maximum that we could, a maximum that is imposed by something in state law. If there is, again, the only way around that, if we want to increase the penalties, is by doing it sequentially. If it remains unpaid, then it goes up by $1,000 a day or $1,000 a week or a month or whatever that period of time seems reasonable.
Commissioner Persinger, can we ask the town solicitor if there's anything in state law that prohibits us from raising it? Because I think one of the issues with the tree removal, especially on the north end, but even in Midtown and below where we don't have as many trees, so they're more coveted, is I think this is something we need to get a hold of very quickly because we have a lot of construction and a lot of trees coming down. And, once these trees are down, they're down. Not,
Yeah, there's certainly a willingness, and I don't know if there's a sense of urgency necessarily, but we did talk about that. There are a number of issues that are in the charter that we're going to come back and have a workshop on. This could be part of our, our workshop effort. The other limitation we have here is because as part of the charter, we have to go through the state legislative process in order to make that amendment. So there's a bit of a delay there, but we can certainly work on this as quickly as possible.
Any other comment from the group? I mean, there's certainly in B, we could, we've got in B, we have $3,000 within 60 days. We could certainly add language in there to be, $3,000 more for every 30 days after that. That would certainly give it more teeth.
I think my gut feeling is we need to stay focused on getting something changed if we need to change it for the aldermen and the fines. Because again, I think a $500 or $1,000 fine when you're building $1 million, or some of these houses are actually 2-3 million. It's a half of 1%. It's the cost of excess materials on a porch. And it's just nothing that would make you blink. So I think if we stayed the direction of, trying to figure out if we can just have it at the $3,000 level, and then they increase, and figuring out what we have to do to legitimize that with what the aldermen can do and how we do that.
So Marcia, are you suggesting we need to go back to the town solicitor to see what we can?
Yeah, I think if I heard Gary right, it's because of something in the code. Commissioner Persinger, is it because there's something in the charter that limits the alderman's right to invoke a fine up to a certain amount?
Yeah, there is in the charter, there is a limit on the amount of fine that the alderman can limit. And right now it's $1,000.
Yeah.
And that's thing that this committee talked about, and the committee's recommendation was we increase that to $3,000.
Yeah.
I think that's possible. There again is some possibility there could be something in state law that would set a maximum that we would have to abide by, but we need to find out whether or not there is anything in state law. And if there is not, and increase it to $3,000 and then come back and deal with, increasing, doubling, tripling the penalty based on the time that it continues to be unpaid. So, I think that's the best approach we can take at this point.
At this point, if we could quickly implement something or make a recommendation to implement something that stays within the boundaries that we have, what about using the $1,000 and implementing that $1,000 will also be fine to the company that removed the tree? We're not going over the $1,000 limit. I think most of these, tree removal companies are probably pretty reputable and aren't going to want to have a reputation of being fined for removing trees without permits.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that. I think that's a question for the town solicitor as well. That's another question that we can pose.
Okay.
The other possibility here is that, in the interim, if we're able to change the maximum fine the alderman levies, in the interim, since we have $1,000 fine, this part of the code could be rewritten so that we take better advantage of the ability to double, triple, et cetera, over shorter periods of time, until people come back into compliance with the code the way it's written. And then if we are able to 3,000, we can revisit at that point with the new 3,000 maximum and see what we want to do from there. But I think that seems to be the best strategy right now.
Okay.
So is the thought to make a recommendation, or do we need to have more data? Do we need to get a sense of from the town solicitor what we can do from a state perspective? again, I'm looking for a little guidance. I mean, is this something we need to have more data before we can make a recommendation? Or do you think we can make a recommendation to put something incremental, a series of $1,000 fines?
I think it's probably two parts. I think you can make a recommendation back to the commissioners that this issue be visited, and as revisiting of the issue, there are a couple of key questions that need to be answered. Is there anything in state law that fine if we increase it to $3,000? In fact, could we levy a fine that's higher than whatever the limit is for the alderman without having it appealed and having to crank back on it? I'm not sure that all of those questions are clearly answered, but it's certainly possible to refer this issue back to the commissioners to get some priority for it. And then, we can come back to you once we have some of those questions answered, and you can decide what you believe is the best strategy, given the limits that, seem to be there. What's the best strategy for increasing the pressure that people who violate the code would feel in order to pay the fines and come back into compliance with the code?
Okay. So with that thought in mind, I'm going to ask if anyone's willing to make a motion that we recommend to the commissioners that they revisit the penalties with an intent to levy stronger fines or more fines with the intent to get those that remove trees to replace the trees in a timely fashion within state law and within whatever constraints there are for the alderman that we get more information on that. I know it's not quite worded well, but it's a better way of saying it. I'm all for it, but does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
I did have one question for Bill and everybody actually from the office. Education and communication, like you're a tree town. In DC, we know it's very clear that trees are important. What are we, a tree city, I think? But Bill and Don and whoever, is there a way that you can, people that are buying big properties, that that as Marcia said, when somebody's building a $3 million house and there's a tree there, they're gonna cut the tree down, and so, or whatever they're doing. And so are we also communicating well to the new land buyers? And can we communicate better? Can this be put in the newsletter over and over again? Can we have signage up? Can it be in, some kind of communication so we can get ahead of it? Because I think that getting the fines, fine and dandy, but at the same token, I think about if they'll ever see the money, and the legal hassles of it. So what's being done to educate people about our tree laws?
Yeah, so when you put in a building permit and you're looking at the area that the new structure will go into, Dawn and Jim will go out and look at where that structure is going to be on the lot and see what trees will need to be taken down and what trees must stay. And so there's an education process there between the property owner and Jim and Dawn. And then I thought Kate had put something in one of our newsletters on tree removal, but we could always go back, bring that back up. More than happy to put that back out in our newsletter about tree removal. Today we had some folks that had bought a house down on Carolina Street on the 3rd block, and they had a question about some trees in their backyard. They went down to the edge of the lake. Bottom line was the trees were not on their property. They were actually on Denrex or possibly even Deldots, depending on what part of the lake they were on back there. And so really that, when it comes to that, you have to get Denrec, Deldot, and sometimes, as Dawn has pointed out, even the Army Corps of Engineers. But if the trees are on your property, you have to get a permit. There has to be an arborist involved if you want to take them completely out, if they're not within the space of the new building that you're constructing. Dawn, did I miss anything?
No, you did a nice job. Keep it
Well,
up.
I think in that case, then, we should sock it to them. You know, because if they're taking the trees out, they're doing it intentionally and it's not a mistake. So, the 1,000 that's already approved, and if you can do $1,000 a day, you know, every other day until, I'm all for a very big fine, as Marcia said, because if you don't do that, somebody else is gonna do it, and anybody that comes in that buys up lots are gonna do it.
The other thing we do is if it's a permitted work, we'll do a stop work order until the fine is paid.
Right.
That's great for the short term.
Okay. So, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna say, Marcia, I think you made the motion, or you agreed to make the motion for stronger penalties to the commissioner's recommendation for stronger penalties, and so I just need a second on our suggestion.
I'll second it. Within state law, yes. I'll
Okay.
second.
Thanks, Jimmy. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that everybody? Dan, Jimmy, are you in favor?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
And I like substantial fines too.
okay. All right. We're coming down to the end, but I'd like to go ahead and move on to agenda item 3. I think we can probably cover this quickly. Number 3 is discuss and possibly vote to recommend to the town commissioners a verification process of professional licenses for contractors applying for town business licenses. So I think I just want to frame this a little bit, and then Elaine, please chime in for me. But our goal here is not to enforce, or not to, we're not asking the town to oversee the work of contractors. You know, all we're asking the town to do is, if these people are professionals, or professional plumber, professional license, when they get their license from the town of Dewey, that we also would ask them to provide us with their professional license number from the state. I think I've got that right, Elaine, is that correct?
And exactly, and only for the professions that the state, you have to have a license. For instance, like a caretaker, which means an adult caretaker, believe it or not, but in a plumber, an electrician that's dealing with anything above 120 volts. It's all laid out, and it's not a lot, but it would be something that we gave people just something for that work permit, and also we kind of catch the bad guys that are coming in getting a business permit, and they should have no business doing other things.
Anybody else have comments? I'd like to get Dawn or Bill, any comments on the thought, on the suggestion?
Yeah, so currently what we do when somebody comes in, we check to see if they have insurance. They must show that they do have insurance. And then Dawn and I talked about it this morning. We are also checking to see if they have a state license, that they are licensed by the state. Dawn, did I miss anything?
No, and Laura and Jeannie down front of the clerks, the receptionists, do check on that to verify. And so if for some reason we get an application in and the application has the contractor's name and they for some reason have not provided a copy of their business license, both Laura or Jeannie would check within the state registration whether they do or not, as well as also looking for business insurance. So they are doing their due diligence to comply.
So let's just be clear the difference that I'm talking about. All right. There's the state business license that they have to operate in Delaware. There's the Dewey business license that they have to operate, and then insurance. And sometimes that insurance is for a couple of days because they can get overnight insurance, but that's okay. You're getting those 3 things. What I'm talking about is their journeyman license. It's like their driver's license. And to add on your, just a line on the business license, if they're applying, because they say they're an electrician, that they put their number, their card, their license number, and so that we know that they actually are certified to be working in electrical, as an electrician in Delaware, because they have to be. They have to have a license. And that's something that's not on the business permit. All you're doing is duplicating what the state has, except just getting a fee for it. So that's what I just wanted to add, that line of what they were getting a license for if a business certification was required in the state of Delaware. And it's really wouldn't add, listen to me, wouldn't add a lot of work to your work except a line on the form. And then if they lied, I mean, I'd like you to collect their license, but if you don't do that, if they lied, it's on them. But at least you're collecting it and maybe looking at it. And so that's what I'm asking for.
I'll try to do that.
Go ahead, Dawn.
My understanding is when it comes to both an electrician and or a plumber, that their business license with the state of Delaware is their permit to do the work. And they would have to apply to the state to be able to do the work that they've been hired to do. Like a plumber has got to call in and be able to get a permit for the work they're doing on home 123 Anywhere Street. In order for them to get an inspection through the approved agencies, then they've got to supply the permit number that the state does supply. So the state does work behind the scenes to have permits for both the electricians as well as the plumber.
For new construction,
yes.
construction.
As far as I know, any sort of permitting, but see, I'm not familiar with those departments and their codes, what they require.
I'm talking about, and I will send this more information to you because I have done a lot of background on this because of my own property, and I've sent it to Dave, but I'll send it for the next round. This is not for new builds. This is for the electrician that's coming in, that's doing the work in my 46 units at Palisade, at Marina View. And so that electrician, the plumber, he is required to have a Delaware license to do that work. Anything under 100, I'll just use electricity, 120 volts. And people are, and I said this before, and you can say, well, those people, they should ask more questions. But they say, oh, I have a business license, I have insurance. And so the people think that they have a business license, meaning for their, whatever their trade is. But they actually don't. They just have a business license. It's just, it's basically a fee to work in town. So I will put this in a bigger, I've sent something to David, but I'll even put more information and I'll send you the state regulations, what you're talking about, how that doesn't cover it. And then maybe we can bring it up again at the next meeting, David.
Yeah, Elaine, I did post what you send me. It is out there. So I think I would encourage everybody to take a look because Elaine did do a lot of research on it. And I think we just need to be careful when we use, because we're using permits, maybe versus license versus another category. So I think what we're talking about is a license to be able to be an electrician that the state issues, or a license that the state issues certifying that somebody has completed the training for, like a plumber or an electrician. That's, I think, what Elaine's trying to get to in the request here. So,
Dave?
Yes, Gary.
Just one comment. I think you need to think through also where this is the Charter and Code Review Committee. Where would this impact the code? Or would it impact the code? Or is this something that the town could do administratively through their business license form without any impact on the code?
Okay.
I didn't hear the first part of what you said, Gary.
I said, is this a code issue? Is this that would need to be?
Yeah, I agree. It could be just an administrative issue that doesn't have to be but when you were bringing up everything about I recognize that about permit cost, and I was thinking, well, why don't we get something for why doesn't the town also give a service? So it may be an addition that doesn't have to be dealt with in this committee, if that's what you're trying to say, since it's not a charter and code issue. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's why I'm just raising the question. Maybe there's a need to put something in the code that would require some proof of professional license. But maybe it's just an administrative issue. That question needs.
I agree.
So maybe we could leave it this way, since we're kind of winding down here, could I ask Bill and Dawn to just kind of take a look at the information that Elaine provided us and make your recommendation as to whether or not that's something we can handle administratively, or you feel like you need some specifics in the code that we need to add that into the code. And if we could ask you to take a look at that and get back to us, we'll put it back on the agenda again for next month. So we can maybe come to some closure. But if we come to something during the month where we said, hey, we can add this administratively, we'll just note that and move on.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll also check with the other towns around us to see what they do. But I think at the end of the day, whoever's hiring these folks and paying these folks need to do the background on it.
Right. Okay. All right. There's one item that we did not get to today, and that is setbacks for swimming pools. I think Kate was going to post. I don't know if she managed to get it done, but I did send everybody that information. That'll be on the agenda for next month when we get together. So I'd ask you to take a look at that. Marcia's done a lot of research on this and wants to bring it to the committee's attention and get some discussion on it. So, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other comments from anyone at this point? No? Okay. So at this point, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion we adjourn, or second.
Second? All right. Thanks, Jimmy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. I will set something up probably in 4 weeks or so. The sooner if we get more information and everybody can do that. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.